Just the intro.
Hello in there! Hey, what's so important? What you got here that's worth living for?
Well, we are live. We're rolling, Bob.
Welcome back to Blade. We made a promise when we got started, a video every Tuesday, and we finally missed it.
Here it is, Tuesday.
Here we are, Tuesday, live. Tuesday somewhere. It's a Gregorian Julian calendar thing, and no, I'm here in North Carolina, and it's been very busy. We've been working on some projects. Jude's got a new house, and but we've had some opportunity to talk, and I thought maybe we could just get together and share a few things that we've been thinking about. Judah, I wanted to really quick. So this is my brother Judah, my dad, and I wanted David. And my dad. You can call him Dad. It's not your dad.
Daddy-o.
Come, Daddy-o.
Daddy-o. David McNair. Daddy-o, a little plug for Daddy-o Cast. There's a blog, a podcast. Listen to some of Dad's poetry and thoughts on things.
And songs.
Oh, we should have had you play a song. We'll get you on here to play a song.
Yeah.
Well, Dad was talking about, Dad just finished reading Pickwick Papers.
Yes.
And I'm going to read it. It's a Dickens classic that I haven't read.
Pickwick Papers?
Pickwick.
The
Pickwick Papers. And one of the things you mentioned was he gets into all the clothes.
Yes, different. The coat, the West coat, the gaiters, which I'm not sure exactly. I just think they were spats.
Yeah.
It may be.
What are spats?
Those are things like Scrooge McDuck wears. They cover
Over
they
the
cover your shoes.
They cover your shoes.
And they go under. Keep your shoes from getting muddy. I guess.
Well, you read these like Dickens or P.G. Wodehouse in particular. Have you read any or listened to any?
Yeah.
The whole dynamic in P.G. Wodehouse between Jeeves and Wooster is sartorial. Like that's the main conflict.
Ooh.
The main conflict is Wooster wants to wear something, and Jeeves is a little too outlandish. So how about just this nice herringbone or something?
Yes.
And to reward him,
Yes.
Wooster will wear something that anyway. I just wonder, what is that something that was just? It seems like that was a big part of society. Is that still a part of society, or are we finally heading towards what we all know is the eventual Star Trek?
The naked society.
No, thank God, no. The Star Trek, the pajamas, uniform pajamas.
The first time I saw Star Trek, I thought, wonderful. Look at there. In the future, they get to wear their pajamas to work. And these are big, important guys.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what like.
But is that with the COVID, everybody working from home, suddenly people are stopping wearing makeup, which I think is great. I stopped wearing makeup.
The question is, do they still have sartorial requirements?
Right. And do they mean anything? Or is that something that will just go the way of, the wig?
Well, I had a friend.
The hat.
I had a friend that talked about how he keeps talking to me about, and I think he's got a good point about how the democratization of he calls it, or I think I would call it,
Excuse me.
the democratization of style. Like as far as like on the internet now, your neighbor is no longer
Living next to
you. Your neighbor, it could be
the flattening, the great flattening
of culture.
Of culture.
But it hasn't made it all one thing, of course. It's made it just very fractured.
Well, and it doesn't matter as much. I was talking to interviewed Danielle Service, who spent some time in Bhutan.
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine a place like Bhutan. I mean, how you put the little bow on the edge of your thing makes a huge difference. Whereas here, you can have a huge variety of clothes. People can show up now in a meeting in jogging pants.
It's obvious a sign of, I'll use the word democratization versus tight community. Pueblos, traditional communities prescribe what you wear, and you must wear those things. And you have little bits of a twist here, an added thing there to show your own personal taste, your own flair. But everything you must wear. There are tribes in the Amazon still where the people go naked except that except they in one tribe they go naked, except they have a certain belt like a vines they wear, and that has to be there.
But that belt is very important.
Yes, and you have to have this. Is it covering it? Not particularly. So, but it's prescribed. It's prescribed, and it's the prescription which is it keeps it's part of the thing that keeps traditional societies together. And one might hypothesize it keeps any society together to have common norms. And when you begin to just let the norms go, what does that signal? And of course, here you think, well, it signals everybody has a right to do whatever they want to do. But what is that? What are we sacrificing for that?
Yeah, what do you lose with that? And that's sometimes I think, well, good, do away with it. Who cares? But I have people take their hats off at my table. There are things that I don't know. I think I owe my foreparent.
You run into the problem of offense. The people offend without even knowing it. And who wants to really? I swear I don't. The people think I do. Take people to task for something. Could you take your hat off, or could you, don't you get some shoes on or something?
Yeah.
And that it runs into a problem of irritation. If everybody dresses the same way, there's no irritation or upsettingness. And also, you're signaling this is an important. If you go to church, you don't wear where to go fishing or something like that. The signals, this is an important ceremony. This is different from other things.
Signaling is important.
Good.
But
good
maybe,
issue.
yeah, good
issue one.
Yeah, issue one. But segueing from that into issue two, much more culturally determinative and entangled is language.
Style is a language. So
it's related. It's a type of thing. But I mean, Dad had a career of largely language and culture being intertwined, right?
Yeah.
Preserving cultures by preserving languages.
Yes.
But I wanted to just touch on something that you mentioned. I've never heard that many people talk about, and that is, what language who spoke to whom. So, what language did Jesus speak?
Yeah, it's a science. It's loosely understood by the populace, as most sciences are. And so everybody thinks, well, Jesus spoke Aramaic. And so we have on the film, if you want to see Jesus portrayed in person, which I have a problem with, but he's speaking Aramaic. Well, everybody knows he spoke Aramaic. Well, he did speak Aramaic to animals, inanimate things like ears, Ephatha, and to children, and to his mom, and to his dad. So he calls his dad Abba. And he's speaking, it's what we call the lower register, the register which you speak at
and you're comfortable
in the kitchen and at the dining room table, whatever, easy, it's comfortable. And you have a high register, which is what we're talking now, or trying to talk now. And so you have registers. Well, Jesus didn't speak Aramaic. This is my humble opinion, and it is. I mean, I haven't made a real scientific, but it's just my natural because it was my career for years. You see, Jesus spoke to Pilate. Well, what did he speak? He didn't speak Aramaic to Pilate. I can guarantee you, I can almost guarantee you that Pilate did not speak Aramaic.
Sure.
He spoke Latin and Greek. Latin because he was an officer in the government. Most everybody in the Roman employ spoke Greek. That's why the guy who's taking care of Paul says, "Can I speak to you?" And he says, "Oh, do you speak Greek?" He was a Jew. So Greek was the language, and in Jerusalem they spoke Hebrew or Aramaic. So I think what we have as a record of the New Testament is a faithful record of what Jesus said
in Greek.
In Greek, because he was from Galilee of the Gentiles, and when he preached to a lot of people who were not necessarily Jewish. Now, however, you could argue, well, but they still spoke Arabic, which was likely to be the trade language in Arabic. I'm not sure, but I think there's a good case to be made, especially when he's talking to Pilate. He talks to Pilate and he speaks to him in pretty, he's talking about serious things
in Greek. But then later, I mean, Paul was probably preaching certainly in Greek.
I think where,
Possible.
yes, certainly. He
Paul
could
always
have gone
went-
anywhere
well, we
else
don't-
as a missionary. So he must have known Greek because he went as a missionary to Greek-speaking areas.
That's an interesting. But then when you get into, it's a big jump. When you get into British royalty,
Yes, that's what makes them. Of course, that's the case of My Fair Lady, is that speech makes you
right?
of a higher class.
But
You have-
you have they're married into the French. You know, you have German speaking. King George the first and second, the Hanoverians
Did not
spoke
speak
German.
English, yeah.
I mean, what language are these people speaking to each other in?
Well, they were speaking in German, but
you think
George
they
III
spoke French?
was raised. Oh, you mean
In
when
the
they were
court.
spoke to other people who spoke German
the,
around.
The French was removed as an item in the court around the Edwardian, like Edward I or II, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
That French was taken out. They used to speak French in the court, right? But English was coming into its own, and we have the heydays in the 1300s. They spoke Old English, or Mid English. Mid English is 1300s.
Mhm.
But in the time of George, good point. He was king. The court joined George II. He was king because they made him king, not because he rose.
Were there any other, off the top of my head, any other royalty that spoke languages other than English or
Well,
French?
here's a good question. People may not know this, but Philip II of Spain, who was the king of the Great Armada that failed against the English.
Not so great.
Elizabeth,
Armada.
Elizabeth married as a Catholic. Married Mary the First, Bloody Mary.
Bloody Mary.
Was married to her, came and participated in the court, got married in England. What language did they speak to each other? Spanish, and I'm thinking perhaps Spanish because Mary's mother was Catherine of Aragon. So
you think they might have spoken
so
Spanish?
Spanish because
courted in Spanish.
because her mother was Spanish. So that Mary and her sister were, which is Mary, were I think their mother tongue may have been Spanish. So it might have been Spanish. If it wasn't Spanish, it could have been English because of training. It could have been, and it could have been Latin.
Could have been Latin.
Latin was at a time and still is today.
We're talking about
used as a
the
language.
1500, late 1500s, because we have letters that Christopher Columbus wrote. He wrote in Latin.
Latin.
And it's it's easier for guys like me to translate it's easier, more common Latin than say
because if you were educated in Latin.
Aeneid.
And so most of the royalty were forced to as kids, right?
Could learn Latin, whether they were very fluent in it, but
somewhat related. Issue 3,
last issue.
So last issue. So language, it ties in. It ties together who you are,
that's right.
Cultural identity, an identity of yourself, identity of the world.
So I was like, if you're like, I was like this, and it tells you what level you're at.
What you let us dad has
Speaking
some language problems with the way people speak.
Yes.
Judah has been thinking about. Jude's works with people in counseling, among other things you do. Can people change? Do people change? And should we expect people to change?
Well,
that's a huge question, obviously. We could talk for hours, but how have your thoughts in brief shifted on that?
That's a good question. The thing that keeps coming back to me is, do we want people to change? Do we really want people to change? Well, you mean
more than just
other people, not me.
How much do we or other people want other people to change? Because the more they change, right, the less they are like them. Or what is it that we change as opposed to what do we keep constant?
Oh yeah,
and if they continue to change at the same rate, is that really change, or is that just
behavior? What do they call it? Behavior. When you change behavior, you we ring a bell and all that.
Behavioral.
But
behavioral science.
Conditioning. We would love to condition, and we do condition children. I'm sorry, we do.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever way you do, you don't want your child picking his nose at the table. You don't want him spitting his food on the floor. And so you have to condition. you're doing two things at the same time, right? You're conditioning that one thing, which is the one thing that bothers you. But really underneath that is you want him to know that there is a system of things. And we were talking about it, your mother and I were talking about, well, when we're talking to people, what is the thing that sort of generally characterizes the whole thing, the whole set of things that you want kids to lose if they can? And it's things that draw attention to yourself, right? Now, you know, you don't want to come in shirtless to the supper table. You don't want to be making any kind of a noise or kind of personal things like spitting or, you know, because it draws attention. And something like
anything that indulges in selfishness.
Self-interest. Yeah. Okay. Self-interest. Yeah.
But I don't know. I think
self-indulgence. Okay.
I think people can change. I think the idea is, I think the Christian idea is that there is and I don't want to use the common, you know, the best your best version of yourself, but there is
an ideal
the person that you deeply are and want to be. And maybe you're not aware of it, you know,
I guess,
and then you're becoming that person.
I guess what I've been working on is the idea of, instead of talking about change as a holistic attack, you know, as a big major thing,
Disruptive.
talking about it in terms of specific small areas, you know, and encouraging big areas of consistency and bolstering it with, you know, talking about change in terms of small ways to make who you are better. So we don't want to change who you are. I guess it made me think of my client who every time I would give him any kind of directive, he was like, "You don't like me. You want me to change. You don't like who I am." And trying to conceptualize, well, I do like who you. I'm not trying to change you into a different person. However, you know, it's hard. It's hard
because those things are part of their identity.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, an adult should be able to understand the difference between surface structure, the superficial, and the underlying. You know?
But really, underlying is what you want to change the most.
That's what you want to say, you know, but you can't change that directly. No. I mean, only by religion or some, you know, something like that. You cannot. I mean, some kind of spiritual move. But of course, when you talk to people, you talk to children, you always say, "Don't do X," because we, you know, gentle people don't do, you know, people, if you want to walk in society, I don't know, what do we say? Christians don't do this. We don't do that. This family doesn't do that. I mean, you always add a little bit of a plug for the overall, the underlying reasons.
It's not a good thing. I mean, I don't know if you necessarily
health. Well, something towards health.
This bothers other people. That's one thing. We don't want to bother other people.
Well, just some thoughts. I wanted to just take a chance to
3-hitter. I like it.
A little go over some things that are on our mind. I do think they're all related. I think the way, you know, signaling and language and the way you dress is part of your identity. And so if you want to change your identity, you need to speak differently in your head and speak differently to other people. And I think there's something about dressing.
Well, it's interesting too. If you want to change somebody, the best way is to, if you want to connect, it's connect with them, and the best way to connect with them is to speak their language.
Very good.
Right.
That's well known to everybody understands that. Right?
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us. We hope we speak your language.
Real quick, Jonathan McNeil says, "Hey guys, cousin Jonathan." Hey Jonathan. Hey, oh, they're all him. It says, "Catching you guys live."
Yeah. We'll hope to see you this summer, Jonathan McNeil.
He says it's irritating when people wear their pajamas to fly. Oh, on the plane.
They can fly, man.
On the plane.
On the plane.
All right. Well, I'm getting the outro.
Superman wore his pajamas to fly.
Superman wore his pajamas. Jonathan.
Maybe that's actually the ticket to flying is wearing.
Maybe
are we off?
We're
still live. Quick, before we say.
Yes, Mark Twain said.
Mark Twain.
Yes, the clothes make the man.
Yeah,
that's why a naked man has no influence